Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Tonight we're going to be starting a brand new parak Yoma Kippurim. This parak is halacha l'maisa. Elements of it are very halacha l'maisa. It's the last parak in the Masechta. And tonight we're going to be learning a blot and a half, really more than a blot and a half. We're learning the bottom of Ayin Gimel Amud Beis. All of Ayin Dalet and Ayin Hey Amud Aleph is a very significantly sized Gemara. We have a lot to do. Let's jump right in at the new parak. A little bit more than halfway down on Ayin Gimel Amud Beis, the new parak opens. Yoma Kippurim Asar B'Achilu V'Shasiya U'Berachitzu V'Sicha U'V'Nilas Asandal V'Tash Mishamita, as we call them the Chameshes Inuyim, the 5 things that are Asar on Yom Kippur. Eating and drinking are pooled together as one. That's number 1. Number 2, rechitza. Number 3, sicha, anointing. So taking a shower, and then a sicha is anointing. Nilas sandals, wearing leather shoes. Uvitash mishamita, and marital relations are also prohibited as well. However, v'amelech v'akal yirchatzu es pneihem, a king and a bride must still wash their faces. They must always look presentable. The Meforshim point out that the kala is only for the first 30 days. It's not forever, but for the first 30 days, she's required to wash her face even on Yom Kippur. Ve'achaya, a woman who just gave birth, tinol es sandal, she should wear shoes. Rashi points out because she might become very cold. Divrei Rabbi Elazar, the Chachamim don't agree about this last one. The Chachamim Osrim, they say that the chaya, the woman who just gave birth, is not allowed to wear shoes. Next, what is the shiur of Isser of Achila? Ha'ochel kakosevas agasa, like a large date, kamoha uchigar inasa. It's including its pit. So the entire volume. In chemistry class, I had a teacher whose name was Dr. Karesh, and we learned about water displacement. What you do in order to measure the volume of something, you drop it into a full bucket of water to the top. And when you take the item out, you can look at the reduction in liquid. That's the exact volume of what we're talking about. Same thing would be here. It includes the koseves with the seed inside. He's ready. And when it comes to liquids, which is a cheek full of liquid, you would be chayiv. All foods combined to the shiur. You could be eating a little bit of crackers with some cream cheese. You could add in some other solids. They all are mitzaref to the shiur. And and all liquids also combine, but foods and liquids don't combine. Foods and liquids do not combine. Of course, there's a very well-known halacha that if there's a halachic scenario where unfortunately somebody is obligated to eat on Yom Kippur, we make them eat b'shiurim unless we can't avoid it. Eating b'shiurim means that they have to eat less than the kakoseves within the time frame of what's called b'chtei achilas pras. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. I hope this applies to no, but sometimes it does. Fine. The Gemara opens on Ayin Gimel Amud Beis, 5-6 lines into the new parak. Asar. Why does the Mishnah say in the very beginning Yom Kippurim Asar in all of these 5 things? That's the wrong language. We know that there's an Isser Kares here. Anush Karesu. Why doesn't the Mishnah say you're chayiv kares? Why does it say that it's asar? And then the Gemara thrusts us into a massive world of discussion. Amar Rabbi Ilav Item Rabbi Yirmiyah Lo Nitzach Ela Chatzi Shiur. Our Mishnah is talking about Chatzi Shiur. What is the sugya of Chatzi Shiur? So the sugya of Chatzi Shiur is if someone were to eat a half of a shiur of a kakoseves, a half of a shiur of that volume of food, what would the halacha be? So according to some, there's still an isser, but there's no kares, right? There's still isurim, but the onshin are different. The isser is still chal. Chatzi shiur is asar min haTorah, according to this sheet on the Gemara. So says the Gemara, yeah, that's great for one sheet. I could understand your approach to say that when the Mishnah says the word asar, that is talking about chatzi shiur asar min haTorah. Fine, no problem. As long as you hold the chatzi shiur asar min haTorah, if you ate half of the amount, you're still in violation of the isser Torah. But according to the one who says that Chatzi Shiur is muter min haTorah, that there's no Isser Dorais of eating half of that amount, then Ma'ikal Meimar, then the word Asr should not be in our Mishnah at all. It's muter, or it's Nisr Derabanan, whatever the case may be. So it says the Gemara, the Itmar, let's show the primary Mari Makom for this sugya. Chatzi Shiur, when it comes to the discussion of Chatzi Shiur eating half of a shiur of what would otherwise be Asr, so we separate out the Onshin from the Isser. The Onish is only with a kakoseves, but the Isser is even with a Chatzi Shiur. And here's the Machlokas and the Amoraim. Rabbi Yochanan, 8 lines from the bottom, Ayin Gimel Amud Beis. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asr min haTorah. He holds the Chatzi Shiur still has an Isser, even though it doesn't have the Onish of Kares. Rabbi Reish Lakish Amar Muter min haTorah. It is permissible min haTorah to do so. So fine. Hanicha Rabbi Yochanan. Back to our question: why does it say Asr? Why does it not say Onish Kares? So the Gemara had said because it's Chatzi Shiur is Asr min haTorah. So when our Mishnah says Asr, it means Asr because of Chatzi Shiur. Okay, Hanicha Rabbi Yochanan. That only works according to Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that Chatzi Shiur is Asr min haTorah. Elo the Reish Lakish, who says that a Chatzi Shiur is mutter, then what does our Mishnah then mean with the word Asr? Ma'ikal Meimar. Answers the Gemara, a very difficult answer, and the Gemara is going to be bothered by this for about 20 lines. Mo de Reish Lakish atzir midrabanan. So Reish Lakish is of the opinion that yes, you're correct. That min haTorah there is no isser of chatzi shiur. However, midrabanan we have a rabbinic injunction against eating a chatzi shiur, and therefore, when our Mishnah says aser, according to Reish Lakish, it's an isser derabanan. So now we have to look at our Mishnah with the following lens. According to both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, our Mishnah, when it says aser, is talking about chatzi shiur. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that's an isser deraisa, because he holds chatzi shiur is aser min Torah. And according to Reish Lakish, it's an isser derabanan. He holds a midoraisa, it's mutter. It is absolutely mutter to eat a chatzi shiur, but midrabanan, we're going to be careful. So says the Gemara, no way. Reish Lakish cannot hold that there's an isser derabanan of chatzi shiur. Why not? So the Gemara is going to present a convoluted question, a very lengthy question. It's about 15 lines of questioning, within which are questions and answers. So pay attention. Ihachi, says the Gemara, if it's true that chatzi shiur is an isser derabanan according to Reish Lakish, then if that's true, then in another halachic sugya, as the dominoes fall, what we learn from here we apply to there. Then in another halachic sugya, we would have to then say lo nechayev aleha korban shvua. What's a korban shvua or a korban shvuas bitui? A korban shvua is as follows. A person says that they make a neder not to eat, and then they eat. So you broke a shvua. So you have to bring a korban. It's pretty simple. So says the Gemara, alama tanan. Why does the Mishnah? By some of the Gemara say alama with an aleph, and some of the old school's Gemara, yours should have that too if you have the old version. When it says here 6 lines, 5 lines from the bottom, Anan Gimel Amud Beis, it says alama tanan. The art scroll has it with an aleph also. It's got to be a typo because that's not what the word means. That's alma, which is totally so. Alama, why? Alama tanan. Why does the Mishnah say shvua shelo ochel? If a person makes a shvua that person says they will not eat, and then they don't eat regular food, but instead, then they eat food that they're not allowed to eat out of the gates. You're not allowed to eat those foods to start with. So the halacha, as Tanakama says, you're chayiv Reb Shimon Poter. The avinan ba, amai chayiv. Why would you be chayiv for eating? Why would you be chayiv a korban shvua for eating food that's treif? You broke your shvua, but you weren't allowed to eat the food in the first place. I make a shvua that I'm not going to eat chazer. What are you talking about? I'm not allowed to eat chazer without my shvua. That's not it where you come up with a korban shvua as bitui. It's usher to eat the shkatzim or masim anyways. So says the Gemara, I don't understand the Tanakama. The Tanakama in this Mishnah says that you're chayiv a korban shvua. Under what circumstances? The person says that I'm not going to eat anything, and then they go eat a piece of pig. So he says you're chayiv for a korban. Why? Mushba ve'omed mehar sinayu. This is a phrase that's used, quoted even in Shulchan Aruch, I believe, if not in the poskim. When a person is mushba ve'omed, you've already taken the shvuah to not eat these foods. You've already agreed not to eat nevelos u'treifos. So if you make a promise that you're not going to eat anything, and then you eat nevelos and treifos, why would you be chayiv? That is a machlokes in the Amoraim. So 3 lines from the bottom. Rav, Shmuel, Rav Yochanan, the 3 of them hold. What we are talking about here is a combination of that which is mutter and that which is usr. You're eating certain foods that you're allowed to, that are halachically mutter to eat, and foods that you're not allowed to eat. You're eating a regular piece of food. Let's say a chalent, right? So you're eating a little bit of chalent, right? Elephants in the room. And then at the same time, you're also eating nevela mamish. So says the Gemara, a person who made a shvua that they're not going to eat, and then they eat some kosher food with non-kosher food, then it's all mitzdarif, and then you have to bring a korban shvua. So that's the answer of Rav, Shmuel, and Rav Yochanan. However, 2 lines from the bottom, and now we're getting back into our territory, because remember where we started, that Reish Lakish was of the opinion that when our Mishnah says that it's usr, it's an isser derabanan of chatzi shiur. So what does Reish Lakish say in this sugya of korban shvua? Reish Lakish Amar, iyata motze, there's no way you're going to ever find a case of chiyuv of korban shvua in this case, unless Ella b'mefarish chatzi shiur, unless the shvua that you took was articulated as the shvua that not me, just as a sample, the shvua that person X takes is, I won't eat a chatzi shiur. What does that imply? That Reish Lakish holds about a chatzi shiur, that it's mutter, because otherwise you would never bring a korban on that, right? He must hold that it's mutter, because the only way to make a chatzi shiur usr, according to Reish Lakish, is to say, b'fem ole, I am not going to eat a chatzi shiur. And then you go to chatzi shiur, then you're chayav a korban shvua, because you lied. That means that he holds be'etzem that it's mutter. So he says that, and that's only v'aliba derabanan. The Rabbanan were of the opinion that if you don't specify the amount, we assume it's a kazais. Or he says, Reish Lakish says there's another possibility, or bistam v'aliba de Rabbi Akiva, or maybe you would be chayav a chatzi shiur according to Rabbi Akiva, who holds that whenever a person asers food on themselves, it's not with a shiur of a kazayis, it's even a kol shehu. That's what the Gemara says here. To Rabbi Akiva, the Amar Adam Oser Atzma b'kol shehu. So these two approaches are within Reish Lakish, one saying that you explicitly stated Chatzi Shiur according to the Rabbanan, or according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that when you accept an Isser of eating upon yourself, it's even a Kol Shehu, so then there too Chatzi Shiur would be Asr. Now, according to this first approach on the very bottom line, what we've seen is that only if a person explicitly stipulates that in their Shavua, that they are not going to eat, to eat a Chatzi Shiur, so fine. So then we see from there that he must hold that Chatzi Shiur is mutter minat Torah. Let's continue. The argument's gonna get a little bit more structured. The chitema, if you want to say that kevan de islay heter minat Torah, because the Chatzi Shiur, according to Reish Lakish, is technically mutter minat Torah, so then kochayel korban shavua. So then maybe we'd say that at this point we can bring the korban because there's no problem of being mushba ve'omed. You're not mushba ve'omed on the food because it's mutter for a Chatzi Shiur. So it says the Gemara, that can't be. Because we have another sugya, the third domino. What's the third sugya? Shvua sa'edus. A shvua sa'edus is a shvua that a person makes when they say, I don't have any testimony to share, but really they did. They were witnesses to a crime. They were witnesses to a halachic crime, and they had what to share, and they didn't share it in the end. So that's an Isser D'Oraisa. And as well, they are going to be chayav to bring a korban. So eina noheges ela beru'uyin laha'id, but it only applies. The shvua sa'idus only applies to the right people. V'havinan ba. When we look at this Mishnah, which says that the shvua of only applies to those to whom it's fitting, what does that mean? V'havinan ba lemeute mai. Who does that exclude? So two shitas. Rav Papa Amar lemeute melech, that a king is not allowed to give edus. Just a general rule, a king cannot give edus. A melech. And Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar lemeute mesachek bekubia. Masechek Bekubia is a famous sugya in Maseches Sanhedrin, where it speaks about that a person who gambles is pasal edus. These shilas do come up, and in fact, the Sephardim are very stark about this. You're not allowed to do even like a lottery ticket. Some Sephardim are mocked, but not to buy them. The poskim, I think Rav Ovadia has a tshuva on this. If not one, then many. He certainly writes about it somewhere. Don't remember the details, but being Masechek Bekubia is a problem. It creates a psul derabanan for edus. So let's say that you go to a destination wedding in Las Vegas and you're gambling like crazy, and then you walk into the wedding hall. From guys like, oh, you look like a yid. Can you come be an aid under my chuppah? And you, if you're Sephardic, would say that even the regular gambling makes you a psul derabanan. So says the Gemara as follows: Lemute mesachek bekubia, that a person who's mesachek bekubia, they are not ra'oi to give edus. Mesachek bekubia midoraisa mechzichazi. On a Torah level, a person who's mesachek bekubia, a person who gambles, they are fit to be edus. V'rabbanan hu depaslu, who only the rabbis were the ones who gave a psul status to this person. And what we see here is that there is no chalos of the korban in such a case. This is a very sophisticated way of saying that Reish Lakish contradicted himself. And there's no way that what he said by us can be true. It can't be that you hold that this Nisr D'Rabbanan, because if there were to have been a real status of an Nisr D'Rabbanan by Chatzi Shiur, then these korbanos in the case of Shua Sa'edus would have been brought, but they were not. So says the Gemara, that's not true. Really, we can still support the Shita of Reish Lakish. Shiny Hassam, that case is different. Amar Kraim lo Yagid, v'hai la bar hagadahu klal. No, this person can't give edus at all. He's totally outside of the camp of giving edus, and therefore you cannot learn from there. And therefore, the Shita of Reish Lakish stands as an open possibility. Therefore, and with this is the summary piece. If that was confusing, it was for me too. If this is the summary of that of what we've learned so far. Our Mishnah says the word asr. Why does it say asr if there are all these surei kares? So says the Gemara, the reason why it says asr, according to Rav Yochanan, is because Chatzi Shiur is asr min Torah, but there's no onesh of kares. And our Mishnah is talking about a Chatzi Shiur. And according to Reish Lakish, there isn't even Chatzi Shiur min Torah, but midirabanan. I hold that the word asr in our Mishnah is an isser derabanan status of the chameshes inuyim. Okay, that's sugya number one for tonight. Sugya number two, connected. There are other cases in Shas where there's an onesh kares, and we also have the word aser, v'hatanya. Even though it's true that the chameshes sinuin are aser, lo amru anush kares. Where does the isser of kares apply? Doesn't apply. It only applies ella al ha'ochel v'shoseh ve'osem alacha b'lvad. So if you look back in our Mishnah, it says Yoma Kippurim Asr be'achilu v'shtiya. It says it's Asr. They're all Asr, but only one of them is an Isser Onesh, which is the case of achila v'shtia. So we see that our Mishnah uses the word aser, even though achila v'shtia and malacha, but malacha is not included in our Mishnah, that we see that it's an isser kares. Why does it say aser? Says the Gemara, hachi kamar. This is really pshat. Ksha amru aser, lo amru ela v'chatzi shiur. When our Mishnah is talking about aser, it's not talking about a full shiur, it's only talking about a chatzi shiur. Aval taka, it's true kishir, if a person eats enough food or drink, then anush kares, then they're going to be chayav kares. And even if it's true that they're chayav kares, ein anush kares ela ochel v'shose ve'osa malacha bilvad, but it doesn't apply to all the others in the list. So if you look back in our Mishnah, the first two, achila v'shtia, which is really one category, those two are aser and have a chiyuv kares as an onesh. The others don't have an isser kares as an onesh. Maybe they're only isur doraisa. Good. V'baisema, second possibility is kikatani aser ashara. When it says aser, it doesn't. The word isser really applies to all the other ones. The tanu, because we learned in a brisa of Rabba v'Rav Yosef. Now, Rabba and Rav Yosef were not tanas. So what does it mean to tanu? So it says the Gemara, b'sha'ar sifrei de Beirav. They had other books, quote unquote, in Beirav. This is a reference to the midrashim of Bamidbar and Dvarim, and they saw over there. How do we know that these things are asr on Shabbos? What's missing from here? Where's achilu u'shasiyah? It's excluded from this list because it's using the language of isser. So it says the Gemara, Tamalomar Shabbos Shivos, that on these things on Shabbos Shabboson, when it comes to Yom Kippur, these things you're not allowed to do. Gufa, let's jump back into the sugya of chatzi shiur for just a moment. Gufa says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, $9 chatzi shiur of Yochanan Amarasu Minatorah, Reish Lakish Amar Mutar Minatorah. When it comes to chatzi shiur, eating half of the requisite amount to violate the isser, Rav Yochanan says it's aser, Reish Lakish says it's mutar. Why do each of them hold the way that they do? 10 lines from the bottom. Rav Yochanan Amarasu Minatorah. Kevan the chazi litzterufe isura ka'achil. Since in theory, had that amount been larger, this is a very strange svar and requires Rishonim to understand it properly. So since says the Gemara that it's chazi litzterufe, that even in a slightly larger form, it could be aser, we therefore assume it's already at the larger shiur. Again, on paper, difficult shita to understand, it requires work. Reish Lakish Amar Mutar Minatorah, Achila Amar Rachmana v'Leka. This makes more sense to us intuitively. The isser only applies when you have reached the requisite shiur and you haven't broken the threshold yet. You haven't eaten enough, and therefore Reish Lakish says it's not good. You shouldn't be doing it, but it's not an isser daraisa. Okay, Eisvei Rav Yochanan and the Reish Lakish. Rav Yochanan, who holds that chatzi shiur is aser min Torah, asks Reish Lakish, Ein liyela kol sheyeshno be'onesh yeshno be'azhara. I, as a general rule, have, and this is speaking about the world of chelev. Without the Rishonim, we would have been lost. Says the Gemara, in regards to chelev, if yeshno be'onesh yeshno be'azhara, that because we know that there's an onesh, we also know that there's an azhara, that there's an isser lav. The word azhara here is to reference the fact that there's an isser daraisa. What about a koi? A koi is an animal that has some features of a behema and some features of a chaya. A behema, the chelev of a behema is aser, but the chelev of a chaya is mutter. So what do we do with a koi? Says the Gemara, if a person eats a koi and he eats chatzi shiur of the chelev, koi v'chatzi shiur, hoil ve'eno be'onesh, in that case, there's not going to be an onesh because there's a degree of suffix. Yachol eno be'azhara. Maybe we should also assume that there's going to be no isser in such a case. Talmud Omar, what does the brisa say? Kol chelev, to include even a case of koi. What does that show you? Chatzi shiur is aser min Torah. That's an explicit brisa that by the case of koi, we were taught in a brisa. Rav Yochanan pushes back on Reish Lakish. Rav Yochanan says, I hold that chatzi shiur is aser min Torah, and Reish Lakish, I have a brisa to boot. I can show you by the koi. It says chatzi shiur aser min Torah. Talmud Lomar kol chelev. Oh, so I have a beautiful marimakom. So says Reish Lakish back to Rav Yochanan midrabanan. No, that brisa is only talking midrabanan. The cross machta ba'amahu, the pasuk is just a support for the din derabanan, but midoraisa, a koi is also mutter b'chatzi shiur. And hachanami mistabra, it has to be that when it comes to a koi that we are only talking about a din derabanan. 3 lines from the bottom, ayin dalam and alf. Disal kadai tach doraisa koi sveikahu. If you're going to tell me that midoraisa, that a koi is a suffix, so then what? We have a pasuk in Chumash that a Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't know what the status was of the animal. The koi is an animal where we don't know if it's a behema or if it's a chaya. So Talmud Lomar, the pasuk in Chumash says, oh, don't worry, HaKadosh Baruch Hu paskin for us. What do you mean HaKadosh Baruch Hu paskin for us? The only suffix is by us. He can't be answering a suffix of what he knows what the animal is. That's not a pasuk in Chumash. We're Amaratz, we don't know. So it says the Gemara, it doesn't make any sense. Koi sveika ud Israel krala suye sveika. HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to bring a pasuk to, it has to be that it's derabanan. Otherwise, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu never would have brought a pasuk in the first place. Hashem doesn't have any sveikos. Says Rabbi Yochanan back to Reish Lakish, imi shumha lo iria. If what you're arguing is from there, that's not a good argument. Why? Because kasavre, turning to the top of Ayin Dalet and Beis. Koi, beri bifnei atzma. He holds that a koi is not an animal that's a suffix. A koi is a beri bifnei atzma. It's its own animal. The pasuk in Chumash wasn't paskening on an animal that's a suffix. It's paskening on an animal that's unique in that it is a beri bifnei atzma. It's its own animal. Yes, it has features of the behema, in which case the chelev should be aser. It has features of the chaya, in which case the chelev should be mutter. It's a beri bifnei atzma. It's not a suffix, and therefore the pasuk works out just fine. If you don't say that, then hadam ravidi baravin in another case scenario by the halachos of dam af kol. What does it mean? Kol la'asuye koi. The pasuk in Chumash says kol by the isser of dam to include even the blood of a koi, this animal which has multiple attributes. So if you want to say koi sveikahu itzrach krala rabuye sveika, we're going to make a drasha from the pasuk in Chumash when it says kol by blood to include a koi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has no sveikos about an animal. It can't be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was thinking the animal was a suffix. Ella beria shiny halchanami. Beria shiny. And this brings us to the end of our second sugya, which is the sugya of whether or not we use the word aser to represent onshim in onshe kares. So sugya number 3 for the night, and this gets into some practical elements. How do we know what the chameshes inuyim are? Especially food. Tanu Rabbana, the rabbis taught us 5 lines down on ayin dal and base. Tanus nafsho sechem, famous pasuk that we know that we're supposed to afflict ourselves. Yachol, maybe afflicting ourselves is this dysfunctional form of self-inflicted harm, right? It's not passive. It's not the passive move of not eating, but rather maybe yachol yeshev b'chamo b'tzinik deshev star. It's like jumping into ice water, right? The ice bucket challenge. Maybe that we should do that all day on Yom Kippur. That's terrible. Says the Gemara, no. That's not what we're talking about. It has to be malacha oriented. We're talking about things that are passive, not things that are active. You cannot jump into cold water. That's not inui. It has to be things that are sheva al tasa. And think about what we said in the beginning of our Mishnah: no eating, no washing, no anointing, no leather, no tashmish. It's passive. It's just not acting, and therefore that's what it has to be. Maybe we should say, okay, all right, maybe it's passive. Maybe you're sitting up in the morning before the sun rises, and then the sun rises, it gets very hot. The chayim lei gets very warm. Lo neima kum tov betula. We don't tell the guy get up and go sit in the shade, because that's sheva al tasa kum v'aseh. Which one is it? So maybe we should say that, or the reverse. Yasiv betula, person sitting in the shade, v'karir lei. So what would we say to him? Lo neima lei. We should not tell him kum tu b'shimsha, get up and go walk into the sun, because that's kum v'aseh. So the Gemara responds, none of this is even shaykh at all. We're not talking about the sun. We're not talking about the cold. We're not talking about self-infliction of any type of discomfort. Dumya de malacha. The type of inui that we're talking about has to be similar to malacha in the following way. Ma malacha lo chilakta ba. Just like malacha, we don't make distinctions what aser and what's mutter based on our own subjective things that we like and don't like. I like the sun, I don't like the sun. I'd rather be in 110 degrees. We don't care what your feelings are in the matter. The things that are inuyim are things that are objective, not things that are subjective. And that's what the Gemara means when it says, Ma malacha lo chilakta ba, af inui lo sachlok ba. Tanya idach, another brisa, a very, very lengthy brisa, which will establish which categories of foods are aser on Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara, we're a quarter of the way down. Another, it's a new brisa, so we can talk about the same thing again. Maybe we should sit in the sun, sit in the cold. Nope. What does that mean? Just like the malacha that we have over here by Yom Kippur, the chamesh is something that we have elsewhere by Shabbos. So it's the same too by restricting ourselves from eating like we have in other places. What category are we talking about? Is that pigul v'nosar, food that is pigul v'nosar? They're isurei kares. So maybe we should say that that's what's usher. So says the Gemara, I'll engage. Okay. Avi, you can then include in the isser pigul v'nosar shehin bekares. But if everything that we're including is chayiv bekares, then v'lo avi, I'm going to exclude us at tevel, which is an isser daraisa too. Sheinu bekares, you are chayiv misa for eating tevel. You are. But, says the Gemara, you're not going to be chayiv kares. So says the Gemara, Tamalomar, no. We have to include tevel as well. Tamalomar ta'anu, and as well, v'nisem es nafsho sechem riba. We have two psukim. The word inu is mentioned twice, ta'anu, and v'inisem riba. We have an inclusion that not just isurei kares, but even chiyuv and misa like tevel. Says the Gemara, okay, I'll take what you're recommending now as well. Avi ha-tevel shuba misa. I'll include tevel, which is a chiyuv misa, which has a chiyuv misa. But maybe I should exclude v'lo avi es hanaveh l'she'en b'misa. But if the Isser Nevela is an Isser Daraisa, but you're not Chayiv Misa for eating the Nevela, so maybe I should exclude that. No, that too is included in the multiple uses of the word Inui. To say Riba, we're going to include other things, even in the case of Nevela. Says Gemara, fine. Avi, I'll also include even the Nevela. Shuvelav, Lo Avi Esachulin, Sheino Balav. But Chulin, a piece of Chulin on Yom Kippur, that should be mutter, because it's not Chayiv Karesh, it's not Chayiv Misa, and there's no lav at all. Says Gemara, no, even here, we have to include, based on Riba, other kinds of food as well. So we're also going to include even chulin. All right, what about food that isn't neutral? What about food that has a mitzvah aspect to it to eat? We've spoken about Isser Karesh. We've spoken about Chayiv Misa. We've spoken about Isser Lav, and we've spoken about neutral foods. Let's continue on. We're halfway down $9 base. Avi chulin she'enan bekum ve'echol. All right, I'll include in the Isser of Yom Kippur of eating foods that are chulin, foods that are not holy, regular food. Go to the store, buy a piece of cake, no problem. But maybe velo avi, maybe I should not include in the Isser of eating on Yom Kippur as hatruma shu bekum ve'echol. There I have a mitzvah if I'm a kohen to eat. Maybe we should have said that that's pater from the Isser on Yom Kippur. Eat up, no problem. So says the Gemara. Well, yeah, absolutely. Why not? If you're a kohen and there's truma, absolutely. Think about the times in the Beis HaMikdash. They're starving. We saw many times in the Gemara, chul the kohen gadol. No, go eat something. Go eat some truma. So says the Gemara, we can't do that either because of the same ribu. Talmud lomar te'anu v'nisam esnaf riba, to include more food. So therefore, we have to include even the mitzvah. So says the Gemara, let's try again. Fine. Aviyas truma shena beval sosiru. Fine, I'll include a food that's a mitzvah that isn't usher to overlook. But what about a food that's usher to overlook? The lo aviyas hakadshim shehein beval sosiru. You can't leave over kadshim. So think about the range that we started with. We started with an Isser Kares. We moved to a Chiyuv Misa. We moved to an Isser Lav. We moved lower still to regular food. We moved food to where there's a mitzvah to eat. And now we've moved to a food that it's usher to not eat. How far do we go on Yom Kippur? Says the Gemara, V'lo aviyas hakadshim shein beval sosiru. 3 lines before the wide lines, 4 lines. But this too is included with the extra uses of the word inui to say, even foods that are usher to leave over, you're not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. And even if you want to say that all of this is wrong, we'll explain what that means in a minute. Harehu Omer, still we should always come back to the following 2 lines before the wide lines. It should be something that it makes the soul at a loss. What type of avedas nefesh are we talking about? That is achila ushasiya. So therefore, this brisa concludes here. We have a little bit more to learn in this brisa, but the brisa concludes here to say that for a whole host of reasons, all foods are included in the Isser of Yom Kippur. What did the end of the brisa mean when it said 4 lines before the end of the wide lines? V'im nafshecha lomar. So says the Gemara, if you want to say that the inui that we're talking about was be'arayos kamishtaikra, that the inui has to do with tashmish amita, with illicit relationships, or not even illicit, but just the isra, just marital relations on their own, says the Gemara, that can't be. Harehu omer v'havati nefesh, inui sheyesh b'avedas nefesh, ve'izeh zeh achilu shesiyah. That's not, we're talking about the daily requirement. People have to eat food. That's life and death. So that can't be talking about that. So debate Rabbi Shmuel Tana, ne'amar kan inui, v'ne'amar lohalan inui. So that's also a problem because we have a comparison of the word inui, ma'lohalan ani inui re'avon. We're talking about an affliction of starvation. Avkan ani inui re'avon. Hold on 1 second. Maybe it shouldn't be about food. We have the use of inui by tashmish amita as well. Says the Gemara, 12 lines from the bottom of the page. Starvation. A ra'av is a famine. Maybe we should say, no, mi'im ta'anes benosai, the story by Lot, where the word inui is a reference to tashmish amita. So therefore, we see that inui is tashmish amita. Great question. What? Oh, Lavan. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much on Lavan. So we see that Inui is related to Tashmish Amita. Done in Inui, Derab says no, we cannot learn from there. We need to talk about an Inui, an affliction that applies to the masses. Done in Inui, Derab Inui Diachid. We cannot learn the Inui of Yom Kippur from something that applies to one particular individual. Okay, but what about another Marimakam? We know that in Mitzrayim there was a general limitation of Tash Mishamita. Vayar es onyenu ve'amrina zo prishos derech eretz. When the pasuk says Vayar es onyenu, that means that husbands and wives are not together. So therefore, what do we see? We have Tash Mishamita on the national scale and Inui on the national scale. Maybe we should learn from there. So says the Gemara, no, Ela done in Inui bidei shamayim, that the food comes from heaven. Tash Mishamita is a decision down here. Ve'in done in Inui bidei shamayim me Inui bidei adam. And therefore, we know that the Inui here is referring to food and nothing else. What does the pasuk mean? This is basically from here until the end of the next amud is basically all drashas. We have enough time to finish. Min hamidbar lamana nosecha. What does it mean with the food in the midbar that there was an inui? Ravami v'Ravasi. We're going to see a lot of machlokos between Ravami and Ravasi. Here's number one. When they go to sleep at night in the midbar, they got the man during the day. They didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. Like we're so used to the sun rising, we don't think twice. They didn't know in the beginning of the early times of the month. They didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. They went to sleep hungry, or they went to sleep just not knowing. So it says the Gemara, the inui was the not knowing. To have pas besalo, to know that there will be food for tomorrow, that is a huge comfort. The Chadamar, 7 lines from the bottom, 6 lines from the bottom. Part of the experience of eating is seeing the food that you're eating. That's part of the geshmak. And sometimes you go to a restaurant, they bring out a steak that's sizzling on a cast iron. The sounds too, it's the whole experience. So the Gemara says seeing the food is different. That's a level of inui. It's a level of affliction to eat a food, but not be able to see what it looked like. What does that mean? Because we know it just looked like whatever it looked like, but you wanted southern fried chicken, whatever you wanted to taste like, it tasted like whatever you wanted, but you couldn't see it. So it says the Gemara, that's a level of inui. And Rav Yosef, who was blind, 5 lines from the bottom, Rav Yosef, Mikan, remez l'sumen she'ochlen ve'in svein. When blind people eat, they eat, but they never are totally satiated. Maybe they are physically, but psychologically, they wish they could have seen the food that they read. Therefore, because seeing food is valuable, if you have a meal where you can choose what time it's at, during the day. What's the pasuk that supports this? Tov mara einayim mehalach nefesh. It's better to see it and than it is to not see it. Amar Reish Lakish, no, you use that pasuk the wrong way, and this is a psychological gemara about histaklus. Tov mara einayim be'isha. The mare einayim, the looking at a woman, can be more powerful. Yoser mi gufo shel maisa, even from an act of tash mishamita. Shneimar tov mare einayim malach nefesh. Even the looking can be very powerful. Bottom line of Ayin Dalad Amud Beis says the Gemara, Ki yitain bekos eno yisalech b'mei sharim. What does this pasuk mean? Ravami v'Ravasi. Yet another machlokes chad amar kol anosein eno bekoso. Anyone who drinks a lot of wine, arayos kulan domos olav kimishor. Then all arayos, all things seem to become mutter when a person is inebriated. Kimishor, like a plateau of land in front of you, like the plains of land in front of you that are. It's just easy, an easy area to walk. Everything is easy to grasp. So here too, the arayos seem to be mutter. The chadamar, no, it's not just arayos, it's everything. Kol anosen inu bekoso, people who drink too much. Kol olam kulo domelav kimishor. Everything seems accessible to them. What about a person who has a lot of anxiety? 3 lines down, ayin hey amud aleph da'ga belev ish yishchena. If a person has daga in their house, in their heart, what should they do? Yishchena. What does yishchena mean? Ravami v'Ravasi. Chadamar yischena, that they should uproot it. Midaito. Okay, I don't know what that means in practice, but it's some type of coping mechanism. The chadamar yisichena le'achim. You should talk to people. The Gemara should be used by therapists. This is the Gemara. When things are very hard for you, talk it out with other people. This raises a very important point. If someone has to vent to you, and they are included in their venting is lashon hara, the Baal Chavetz Chaim considers it chesed to listen to that person. B'tnai that you don't believe what you hear negative. That's very hard to do. But if you hear a ma'isa from, because you have to validate the person you're listening to, but that's the din. It's considered, if you can do it. Otherwise, you have to say, I'm sorry, I'm not frum enough I can't listen. I'm not the right person. Don't use names, just leave out details, whatever. But that is the din. It's considered a chesed to listen to someone who's venting based on this idea of yisichena le'acherim. 5 lines down, v'nochash afar lachmo. For a snake, his food is afar ravami v'Ravasi. Yet another machlokas. Chadamar afilu ochel kol ma'adane olam toim bahem tamafar. Everything he eats tastes like dirt. V'chadamar, another pshat is afilu ochel kol ma'adane olam ein daitem yosheves alav ad sheyochel afar. Nope, the other way. He can eat anything he wants, but really deep down, what really is miyusheves, what it really makes him settled is eating afar. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Bo Reish Lo Kamidas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Midas Basar V'Dam. Hashem is different than kings of flesh and blood. Midas Basar V'Dam, Maknit Es Chavero Yoredim Al Chayav. When you get in a fight with someone, you want to ruin their parnasa, you want to down into the grave. You're ready to go to battle. But Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu ain't okay. That's not true. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave klalos, all of the following examples are examples where HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave klalos, but they were able to keep their ochel. Even a snake, anywhere he goes, there's dirt everywhere. There's worms they could eat anywhere. There's dirt everywhere. Says the Gemara, Yored lemata mizanos avimo. Even if you go into the ground, there's dirt there too. What about kilelas kenaan? So ochel masharaba ochel v'shosa masharaba shosa. He can eat and drink, no problem. Kilelas isha. When he cursed the woman, akol ratan achareh. Everyone still has a yetzer hara, even though she was cursed. That bi'itzavon teladi, that she'd have a hard time having children. Kilelas adama. He cursed the ground. Akol nizanim mimena. Even though he cursed the ground, everybody gets all of our food, vegetation from it. All right, next little sugya we're going to be learning here is about this one pasuk. The pasuk reads, "Zacharnu es hadaga asher nochal b'mitzrayim chinam." Remembering the daga, the fish that was eaten in Mitzrayim chinam. This pasuk is very difficult to understand. Rav Shmuel machlokes. Chad amar dagim. One says the pasuk is simply talking about fish, like the actual food. The Chad amar arayos, that the pasuk is a homily and it's a reference to arayos. Man amar dagim dichsiv neechal. No, dichsiv neechal, because the pasuk says that there was dagim that was eaten. Man amar arayos dichsiv chinam, because it says chinam. Man amar arayos aksiv nochal. What is the person who holds that the pasuk is referring to arayos? What about the word neechal? Says the Gemara, lishna ma'al yehuda nakat dichsiv, like the pasuk says, achlo mechata pia v'amarti lo pa'alti oven. If a person eats food, they clean off their face when they're done. They eat treif. It's like nothing ever happened. So what the Gemara says, and Rashi highlights is that this is a mashal, that a person could do an isser of arayos, and afterwards they would clean off their bodies as if nothing ever happened. So that's what the pasuk means. According to the one who says that the pasuk was actually talking about dagim and it wasn't a homily, so then my chinam, what does it mean at the end of the pasuk that it's chinam? You have to buy food from the market. You don't just get to take fish off the stand. You got to pay for it. Says the Gemara, they got it for free. To Amar Mar, Yisrael show in mind when the Jews would stick in a bucket of water into the stream in order to get water to drink. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mazmin lahem b'soch hamayim dagin ketanim b'kadehen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu would make it that they get fish for free. That's what the word chinam means. More questions on the pasuk. Bishlam alaman damar dagim aval aras lo pritzibu. I could understand the shita by dagim aval aras lo pritzibu that they weren't doing anything wrong, because the pasuk says in regards to aras that they weren't doing anything wrong. Hanu dichsiv gan naul achosi kala, and the pasuk continues gal naul ma'yan chasum. So that pasuk seems to show that there was a degree of self-restraint, that there was no arayos issues. But according to the one who says the pasuk is talking about arayos, then what does the pasuk mean when it says my mayan chasum? That people were showing a degree of self-restraint with arayos. So it says the Gemara, remember, this is before Matan Torah. There were certain people they were never allowed to be intimate with. The person's mother is a classical example. However, there were other family members, aunts, and other such types of aras that were Isuri Karis once the Torah was given. But prior to Matan Torah, if you're just a Ben Noach, then there's no Isur there. So that's what it means. That when it says Mayan Chasum in Maseches in Shir Hashirim in the Megillah there, that what that pasuk means is that they did not violate the basic rules that they had as a Ben Noach. So it says the Gemara still more. I understand according to the Shita who holds that the pasuk of Dagim is talking about arayos. Why was it that people were crying? As mentioned, prior to Matan Torah, they were allowed to be intimate with certain people who were Isurei Kares. Now the Matan Torah happened, now they're not allowed. So that's what the Bechi was. On family members that used to be permissible to them. Now they're crying out. What were they crying about? So it says the Gemara, they're crying about both. They're actually crying about both. It's not so simple. The food and the arouse. It was that's a basic, strange answer to the Gemara. But the basic answer of the Gemara is that the pasuk was referencing both. Next, halfway down 9 Hamanov, the Gemara says, these foods which they did not have access to, Ravami v'Ravasi, they have a machlokas here as well. Chadam or ta'am kol haminin ta'amu b'man. They could taste everything. However, tam chamesha saminin halalu lo ta'amubo. There were 5 things that are listed in this pasuk that they weren't able to taste. V'chad amar no tam kol aminin ta'amanu mamashan v'halalu ta'aman v'lo mamashan. They could taste everything and its texture. So let's say you're eating potato kugel. So it'll taste like potato kugel and it'll feel like that in your mouth, even though it's mud. You want to eat something, you want to eat sunflower seeds? Great. It's going to have the same crunch, whatever it is. However, with these 5 foods, you could taste them, but you didn't have the texture of the bite. That's what the Gemara makes as a distinction. Pasuk says, Kezera Gad Lavan, that the man was like God, which is like white God, which translates as coriander. Amar Avasi, coriander is not white. Amar Avasi Agul Kigita, it was round like coriander, Vilavan Kemargalis, and it was white like a pearl would have been white. And Tiny Mamihachi, God, other examples of what the word God means, Shadoma Lezer Pishtan Bigivolin, similar to the Pishtan, to the flax, which is still in its stalk. Acher Momrim, another explanation of the word God, Shadoma Lehagada, the man was so appealing to people, Shadoma Lehagada, similar to an agadata that it's like a storyline in the Gemara, Shemosheches Libo Shel Adam Kamayim. That's agadata's Mosheches Halev, that when a person's speaking, they should always try to have a story. It draws people in. Tanya Idach, another brisa says that what's the word God telling us? Fascinating. Shemagilam Yisrael iben tisha l'rishon iben shiva la'achron. Let's say that a woman, we don't allow this. We don't allow for this to happen. If God forbid a couple gets divorced, or if the husband dies, the woman's not allowed to remarry within 3 months because maybe they had tashmish shamita right before he died, and maybe she's pregnant. So where does the man fall? So who's the father? So says the Gemara, if the father lives down the block as the previous husband, then the man's going to fall double by him because the kid's food really should be over there. And if it's the new husband, then they're going to get double over here. So that's what the Gemara says, that the man was Magid Lahem Yisrael ben Tisha L'Rishon, if it was really 9 months of birth from the previous husband, V'ben Sheva La'achron, or it was a 7-month-old from the other husband, Lavan, Shemal ben Avonosein Shel Yisrael, and it was white in that it revealed, it removed, the sins of the Jewish people. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Rabbi Yossi Amar Kshem Shanavi, just like a Navi could tell us details that were hidden, we would never know about them. So too says the Gemara, Kach Haman, 2/3 of the way down, Kach Haman, Magid Lehem L'Yisrael Masha Bechor and Masha B'Stakin. Ketzad, how could the man teach us deep, dark secrets? They're not people. Now, how does it work? So it says the Gemara, similar as before. 2 people came to Moshe and they had a din Torah. Ze omer avdi ganafta. One person says to the other, you stole my slave. Ze omer atam machartoli. You sold him to me. Amar la Moshe la boker mishpad. Let's wait for the morning. Let's see where the man falls. If the man falls where the Eved used to live, then I know X. And if it falls with the new guy, then I know Y. L'macharim nimtza omro. If the omer babais rabo rishon, if we find the omer of the Eved in the first house, biyadua shezek and avo, then we know that the next guy was the ganib, because the man for the Eved fell by the original owner's house. Im nimtza omaro beveis rabo sheni, and if the man would fall by the second person's house, biyadua shezek mecharola. It's clear that there was actually a sale. Continues the Gemara, same exact thing when a man and woman would come argue. Ze omer hi sarcha alai. She was the problem. V'hi omer su sarach alai. He's the problem. Amar lehem Moshe la boker mishpad. Let's see what happens in the morning. How so? L'macharim nimtza omra. If her portion was bebeis bala, it was still at her house. Biyadua she sarcha alav. And we therefore knew that she was the one who was at fault, because she should have still been at her house with her husband, because that's where her food was. Nimtza omra bebeis avia. But if in fact her omer was by her father's house, so then biyadua shehu sarach alav, that the husband was the one who did something wrong. The pasuk writes, "Who read the satal it falls down, Yard Haman Alav." Uchsiv, another pasuk says, V'yatza ha'am liktu. One says it falls like dew. The other says you have to go out and get it. And then the other one says, Uchsiv shatu ha'am v'liktu. You have to go roam around and pick it up. Haketa. These are 3 different approaches, says the Gemara. Tzadikim Yard al Pesach Bateim, just like the dew. It's on the grass. You walk out of your house, it's right there. Beinonim Yatzu v'liktu. They had to go out into the fields and they had to collect it. Rishaim shatu v'laktu. But the Rishaim, Kadosh Baruch Hu still fed them, but they had to go walk around and find their man. Ksiv, one more and then we're going to stop. Ksiv, lechem uchsiv ugos uchsiv tachanu. One got bread, one got cookies, and the other got tachanu. They had to grind it themselves. Same exact distinction. So ketzad tzadikim lechem. The food came perfectly prepared. Beinonim ugos, they had baked goods. Rishaim tachanu berechaim. They had to go grind up their own foods. Odacha b'meducha. What does it mean that they were ground up? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav V'yitem Rav Chama Bar Chinana Malamid sheyered lahem liYisrael im haman tachshite noshim Davar sheniduch b'meducha. There were certain spices that came down that were used for perfume, and when it came down with the man, it's like mamish, like gifts falling from heaven. They would make perfume out of it. Ubishlo b'paror. What does that mean? Rabbi Chama malam shiur lahem Yisrael im hamon tzike kedera. Spices for food as well. Spices for the pot. They could cook with it. They may view a love od nadava baboker. What does that mean? My baboker, more gifts. Amarushmo bar Nachmani Amar Rav Yonasan. Medaber shiur them baboker malam shiur du lahem Yisrael avonim tovos amar golios imaman. That expensive margolios, expensive stones would fall from the heavens. We're going to stop right here. 5 lines from the bottom at V'hanesiim, bottom of Ayin Hamid Aleph. On Shabbos, Yimir Hashem, we'll get all the way through Daf Ayin Vav Amud Beis, and then we'll figure out Sunday and the rest of the week. Sunday's a fast day, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm out of town. We'll figure it all out. I'll keep you posted on WhatsApp. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
First time I think you ever stopped in the middle of an art scroll paragraph.